It's time for Lefties Losing It. In recent weeks, we have heard so much about fractures on the right, about the MAGA base being divided, about Trump losing support among Republicans. It's times like this I like to check in with CNN's polling expert, Harry Enton. How bad is it, Harry? Is the president losing Republicans?
No. Look, this is still Donald Trump's Republican Party, and we can see it here. It's like a rock, to quote Bob Seger. I mean, take a look here. Republicans who approve of Trump. 6 months ago, it was 87%. Now, well, hello, it's the same number. It's 87%. He has not lost any support among Republicans compared to 6 months ago. As I said at the beginning, he's like a rock. He's like a rock. The Republican base is sticking by Donald Trump at this point in time.
That's fascinating, Harry. I wonder how it compares to other recent presidents. Now, this next bit is likely to upset our sensitive lefty viewers, so perhaps, I don't know, go off and make a cup of tea, yes?
Donald Trump, if you look at 21st century presidents' own party approval at this point in term two, who leads the pack? It's Donald John Trump. 87% of Republicans approve of Donald John Trump. You go back to 2013, 78% of Democrats supported Barack Obama, and it was 78% of Republicans who supported George W. Bush back in 2005 at this point. So Donald Trump has the biggest own party, highest own party approval of any president who served their entire second term in the 21st century.
That was fun. Now let's check out some tolerant lefties being delightfully inclusive and kind when met with someone who may have a differing view to them. Of course, they immediately resort to threats and violence.
How's that? Whoa, 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 whoa. You just hit me with the sign, right?
A lot of this security has weapons. You should get the out of here.
What are you going to do?
You're a nobody. You're a nobody. You're a little cuck nobody, and so are you.
Are you going to use weapons?
No. We might. We might. You want to find out?
You got cops right over there. Nobody.
Do you support that message?
Nobody, Ben.
I support you leaving.
We're not going to leave.
Oh, can't you just feel the love? Such well-balanced and compassionate people.
Okay, so he is dragging Trump and ICE officials, law enforcement. Excuse me, ma'am. Do you support this? They are dragging the president. What happened?
I said you're a Nazi, kid.
How am I a Nazi?
He's a troll.
Real inclusive. Really inclusive.
You know, the left doesn't just have a violence problem, that much is clear. They also have a racism problem. The open hostility towards white people, particularly white men, the unrepentant racism has been normalised for far too long. This next woman speaks without fear of being labelled a hideous racist because she's heard this sort of toxic rhetoric everywhere.
Charlie Kirk. Like, I'm glad the guy's dead, actually. So,
You're glad he's dead?
yeah, I'm glad. White men are literally the single greatest threat to humans being fed, housed, clothed, having their basic needs. White men are the greatest threat to that.
Well, I don't see any problems.
Because you're a white man! That's
Well, you're also unable to name me an example, right?
The example is you having the privilege to even be out here.
Now, you'll remember Donald Trump and New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani having a very civilised, polite get-together in the White House. Well, the lefties lost it after that because Zohran didn't attack the president in the way they would have liked. So, like a good little coward, he's now gone back to calling President Trump a fascist. He's gone from this.
Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about...
That's okay. You can just say yes. Okay. It's easier. It's easier than explaining it. I don't mind.
Yep, he's gone from that to now claiming that he in fact answered yes to that question and he does see Donald Trump as a fascist.
Mr. Mayor-elect, just to be very clear, do you think that President Trump is a fascist?
And after President Trump said that, I said yes. And
So you do?
And that's something that I've said in the past. I say it today. And
You've also said in the past that President Trump has engaged in a, quote, attack on our democracy. You've called him a despot. Do you still believe President Trump is a threat to the democracy?
everything that I've said in the past, I continue to believe.
Pathetic, Zoran. Absolutely pathetic. Now, let's have a look at some of the entitled antics of protesters who are helping to destroy the profitability of businesses that cooperate with immigration and customs enforcement, ICE. Businesses that simply comply with the law. Watch these idiot lefties lining up to buy 17-cent ice scrapers at Home Depot, then returning them and then buying them, which essentially stops anyone else, like real customers, being able to shop at Home Depot.
What are you buying? An ice scraper. Nice. What are you guys buying?
We are buying
Ice scrapers.
Let's bring in documentary filmmaker and commentator Ami Horowitz. Ami, no shock that those scenes are from California. This would be costing affected businesses a fortune.
Yeah, California, my home state. Oh, I'm so proud. By the way, did I hear that right? The ice scrapers are 17 cents. Well, obviously, it's in California. There is no ice. I looked at my local store. I heard about this. They're $2.99. So, yeah, I would have gotten a line for them also. Just wouldn't have returned them. They're too good a deal. Look, for them, this is a twofer, right? Which means, like, on the one hand, they get to do two things at one time, right? They get to protest the fascism of Trump, right? And the ICE raids, and at the same time also help to take down capitalism. So for them, it was a 2-for-1 deal. You know, the right never does this, right? When we have, obviously, the right has issues with the left, issues with different governments, in the city governments, state governments. President was on the left just last year. But we didn't do this thing. We didn't disrupt commerce. We didn't disrupt people's lives. We didn't go to people's homes. That's not the way the right does business. And by the way, I don't know if you saw that in the clip, but they had 24 white crosses to basically saying that there are 24 people who died in ICE custody since Donald Trump. Well, as you know, Rita, I'm a data guy. I don't just let that go. I go into the numbers. I go into the weeds. I did it with this also because that didn't seem right to me. And yeah, indeed, there were between 20 and 24 deaths. But yeah, not exactly in ICE custody. I'm talking, the people that died were actually mostly in hospitals where the U.S. government was actually trying to treat them for underlying conditions. They died in the hospital. Some of them were suicides. But of course, let's not let the truth get in the way of the narrative of the left, right? And, you know, I want to point out another thing, that Home Depot, they're not involved in these ICE raids. They don't coordinate with the U.S. government. They went to great pains to say, we have nothing to do with this. But of course, the left doesn't care about the truth, doesn't care about that. And I'll just add one last thing about this, Rita. Look, as you know, we've talked about illegal immigration for years on the show. And I'm going to take a backseat to no one on how I wanted to stop illegal immigration and get rid of illegals in this country. But it's also a very bad look. Okay, when you run into Home Depot and grabbing people off the parking lot or trying to get jobs, it's one of the reasons, just from an optics perspective, it's one of the reasons why there's been a degradation in support of Donald Trump with the Latino community, which in no small way put him over the top. So I think also one has to look at the politics of this, and it doesn't look good.
It doesn't, but if you want to have mass deportations, you're going to have to do that. It's not. There's no nice way of going about this. There's no way where you're going to be able to deport people who are in the country illegally without scenes that are like that and they're sometimes emotional and hard to witness. But it's what he was elected on. He has a mandate to do it. But, let's stick with law and order. There's been another shocking, unprovoked, violent attack on public transport with a young woman set alight by someone who looks to be a career criminal. And people are drawing comparisons with this case with the horrific murder of Irina Zarutska, whose brutal stabbing was caught on video. The 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee was killed by someone who should have been behind bars. And that is also the case with this latest attack where 26-year-old Bethany McGee was set on fire on a Chicago L train, allegedly by Lawrence Reed. Now, this is a man with 72 prior arrests. His name's Reed, and he's now facing terrorism charges. But incredibly, Army, the judge initially overruled a request from prosecutors to have Reed locked up. I mean, this man should have been behind bars. This attack should have never happened. Thankfully, Bethany has survived the attack, but she has suffered horrific injuries.
Yeah, grievous, terrible injuries that may follow her for the rest of her life, unfortunately. Another example of blue city failures on crime, and I think that we have been facing in New York City and will be facing, obviously, acutely with Zoran Mandani. 72 times being arrested. Rita, I can't think of something I've ever done 72 times at all in my life. That's a lot of arrests. And by the way, more than that, he broke probation over a dozen times. Just so you understand, when you break probation once, you're supposed to go back to jail immediately, okay? But it goes back, remember that the whole bail discussion we had, that video I shot just a couple weeks ago, we talked about it. It's so fascinating because if you remember in that video, I was asking people, do you think your criminal history should be part of how the judge looks at what your sentencing will be? The answer is obviously yes, right? I mean, what else are you going to go by? But the left refuses to do that. This is an example, of that video coming to life where the judge themselves are saying, I'm not going to take their criminal history into account. It's unbelievable. And by the way, this idea of setting people ablaze on our city's transport systems, this is not an isolated incident at all. In fact, I was looking at it. In the last 12 months, Rita, 5 people in Chicago and New York alone were set on fire in those transit. 5 people, Rita, okay? This is an epidemic, okay? No, you can't, this is unbelievable. And look, this is also, I want to point out, really a mental health crisis also. And I think it's an example, I've said for years that, I hate to say it, but we know that a lot of these crimes are committed by people with mental health. I think we need to go back. It was Reagan who actually deinstitutionalized mental health criminals. And I think we have to reinstitutionalize people. I don't think we have a choice. And lastly, I'll talk about Brandon Johnson, the absolute and utter failure of a mayor. His response to this was unbelievable. He was talking about how, first of all, this is an isolated incident, untrue. Crime is up massively in the Chicago Transit Authority. And I was talking about how he's trying to make Chicago one of the safest big cities in the country. Yeah, total fail. Chicago is 3 times the national homicide average. And by the way, has a higher homicide average than Medellin, Colombia. So sorry, Brandon Johnson, that's just not the case.
He is amongst the worst mayors in America, and that's saying something. Army, before you go, President Donald Trump signed an executive order earlier today that designates chapters of the Muslim Brotherhood as foreign terrorist organisations. The Muslim Brotherhood is a Sunni Islamist organisation founded in Egypt back in 1928, and the White House argues this designation will help the US combat the group's transnational network, which is set to fuel terrorism against US interests and allies in the Middle East. Army, is there going to be much resistance to this move by Donald Trump? Surely the Democrats aren't going to side with the Islamist Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah, first of all, I spent over a year researching and interviewing members of the Muslim Brotherhood around the world. I went to Cairo and Istanbul and Beirut, Germany, and I met with dozens of Muslim Brotherhood leaders and lay people around the world. And I can tell you it's one of the most dangerous organizations that exists. So kudos to the president for designating them. I'm asking and pushing this for years as a terrorist organization. As far as your question when it comes to the left, they're going to cry foul on this. Of course they are. The Muslim Brotherhood was telling me that they have co-opted the left. Like that was part of their strategy. And they, of course, adopt the language of the left. They talk about victimhood and colonization, right, and occupation. These are all things that they use. They know that the left kind of is attracted to that. And the left has been, for the most part, supportive. The left makes arguments for them, saying they're not a political organization, they're a religious organization. You can't go after them. You can't attack them. While they are those things, and by the way, so is organizations like Hamas, but their main point of business is terror. Like Hamas, and I mentioned Hamas a couple of times because Hamas is a direct offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. Al-Qaeda is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. There are almost a dozen terrorist organizations across the world that consider themselves part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Their slogan is jihad is the way. and dying for Allah is the greatest good. That's their slogan. This is not me saying this. This is them saying this about themselves. They're incredibly dangerous. And by the way, they have really spent a lot of time and effort in Europe and the United States. The largest Islamic organizations in the U.S., CARE, the student organizations, are part of the Muslim Brotherhood. They're associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. And also, very dangerously, they are really involved in the jails. Most people who convert to Islam in the jails do it under the auspices of the Muslim Brotherhood, and 35 to 40,000 people a year are converting to Islam in our jails. And the latest estimates are that 15% of the total population of jails are actually Muslim, and it's a direct response directly because
fascinating.
The Muslim Brotherhood has been converting them. Yeah,
that is fascinating. Ami Horowitz, thank you so much for those insights. Welcome back. Now, pop star Beyonce and Jay-Z turned heads, or to be more accurate, Beyonce turned heads with her outfit at the Las Vegas Formula One event. Let's bring in comedian and fashionista Alex Stein. Alex, your verdict on Beyonce's latest look?
I like it. I think she looks good. Now, Jay-Z, he needs some work. I feel like Jay-Z is not a very handsome man, and I'm not trying to attack Jay-Z, but I do think Beyonce, from Houston, Texas, my state, even though she is crazy, you know, I'm a man. She's showing them off, you know, and God bless her for it. We need more women
You're
like
forgiving. You're obviously forgiving all the campaigning she did for Kamala Harris, turning up to that rally, fooling people into thinking she was going to perform. That's why the crowds turned up. They thought they were getting a free concert. And then she just gave some awful speech for about 3 minutes and disappeared. So you've forgiven all of that. So you are very shallow indeed, Alex Stein. Now, I want to ask you about Morgan Gazer, who was captured, thankfully, by Illinois police after she cut off her ankle bracelet monitoring device and fled. This girl's only 23. I thought she was still behind bars for repeatedly stabbing a classmate to supposedly appease Slenderman. You'll remember that case, Slenderman, a fictional character. It's a case, Alex, that shocked and fascinated America and the world. There's been documentaries, there's been films about it. And this girl was just able to cut off her ankle monitor and disappear.
Well, yeah, Rita, you know, the kind of creepiest and weirdest part of this whole incident is that when she was 12 years old, you know, and she stabbed this woman, her and her friend stabbed another young girl. And they were lucky that the person that they stabbed lived, because they got a lighter and a less harsh sentence if the person died. So I think that we're going to continue to see Morgan do this kind of things. You know, obviously she has some sort of mental illness to stab anybody, especially at 12, to be that violent and influenced by, you know, scary movies or, you know, fictional people telling them to do stuff. Obviously, she's very mentally ill. So I think we're going to continue to see her in the news. And she's basically been raised in a prison. So she probably doesn't even know how to function in the outside world, you know, growing up in group homes. So it's not a good situation. You know, I don't feel too bad for her, but I know she was a kid, so people can't change. But, you know, there is a saying, you know, a zebra can't change their stripes too.
I know she was terribly young, but I think at that age, you know, repeatedly stabbing someone is not a good idea. So I think she knew what she was doing was wrong. Now, this, I can't believe that Erica Kirk has even had to address this, but she's addressed the controversy around hugging the Vice President, J.D. Vance. It was the most absurd conspiracy theories I've heard all year. All these lefties suggesting she had acted inappropriately and that there was something happening between her and J.D. Vance. I'm going to play you the full hug so you know precisely what triggered thousands of lefties. That's it. That's the whole thing. But the fact that she put her hand on his head gave birth to so many vile videos, Alex, from lefties suggesting that she's having an affair and that she'd crossed a line and that Usha Vance was absolutely furious. And there were so many ridiculous takes that overnight Erica Kirk addressed the issue with Megyn Kelly.
Forgive me, did you see people didn't understand the hug that you and JD had? They went to the weirdest places, Erica.
Oh my gosh, you guys. Please. So for those of you who know me, I'm a very, hug is
yes,
like.
You're an intense hugger. It's
Whoever
awesome.
is like hating on a hug needs a hug themselves. I will give you a free hug anytime you want a hug. My love language is touch, if you will. But seriously, that hug. So I will give you a play-by-play. Like walking, they just played the emotional video. I'm walking over, he's walking over, I'm starting to cry. He says, he's so proud of you. And I say, God bless you. And I touch the back of his head. Anyone who I've hugged that I have touched the back of your head when I hug you, I always say, God bless you. That's just me. If you want to take that out of context, go right ahead. Again, that to me shows that you need a hug more than anyone else. So if anyone...
They were acting like you touched the back of his ass.
I feel like I wouldn't get as much hate if I did that versus...
Alex, what can you say? I just feel so bad that she had to address that.
You know, I'm happy that Erica did address it and laugh it off because it's absolutely ridiculous. And, you know, let's be real. She just lost her husband. She's grieving and she's having an emotional moment with the vice president of the United States. So the fact that she gave him a hug and people want to create all these fake narratives is absolutely absurd. And people will take any sort of shot at Charlie's legacy. And this is another case where all these people got clout for, you know, commenting on Charlie's death. Now they're trying to go after Erica. It's absolutely disgusting and nothing was inappropriately done whatsoever.
Well said, Alex Stein. Thank you for your time. Let's bring in Sky News contributor Kosha Gator. Kosha, Swedish doom goblin Greta Thunberg has been banned from Venice for dyeing the Grand Canal green over the weekend. Yes, the climate zealot turned anti-Israeli activist and around 36 other global warming alarmists were slapped with the ban, which only lasts 48 hours. Greta also copped a small fine. The activist said the dye is harmless and was used to draw attention to the massive effects of climate collapse. They also displayed a banner reading, "Stop Ecocide," from the Rialto Bridge. And it wasn't just Venice. Green dye was released into canals, rivers, lakes and fountains in 10 different Italian cities. Kosha, I don't think the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, is going to be a fan of this sort of activism. She doesn't have much patience for the likes of Greta Thunberg, and she took some tough action during COP30, rejecting various climate change measures that were being proposed.
Yes, she's of this ascendant movement that wants to end all that nonsense and serve her constituents. She's also famous for the eye rolls. I think the Giorgia Meloni eye rolls are a genre unto themselves. But hopefully there's more than eye rolls. I don't know what recourse there is with Greta, because she is ultimately a performance artist, in my opinion. And breaking norms, rules, laws is part of her performance art, and paying the fines is the cost of her act and the cost of doing business. So she will incur these fines, but it's just a little bit here and there, a slap on the wrist, and she achieves her goal, which seems less and less to be about climate change and more about fame, personal fame. So she's going to keep doing it.
Well, this is it. She was so passionate about the Palestinian cause, and that seems to have been forgotten because Trump orchestrated a peace deal. She didn't seem to celebrate that too much.
Nope.
It's just like nothing had happened, back to the climate alarmism.
Yep, until the next thing opens up for her.
The next thing that the left wing gets behind. Incredible. Now, we've discussed in recent years the rise of the right around the world, from South America to Europe, and that growing list of countries may include France. Marine Le Pen's conviction in an EU corruption case has paved the way for Jordan Bardella to become the leader of France's populist right party. It's called the National Rally, and Kosha, he has taken a commanding lead in the polls. He could become the country's next president. It's quite incredible how popular he is. He's a young man, but people see him as a successor to Emanuel Macron.
They do, because the fundamentals in Europe and Latin America and all these places, America, England, and here, I would say, are in alignment with the populist right. All those things, from immigration, economy, cost of living, energy that we just discussed. And the movement is bigger than any one person. Yes, if there's a charismatic leader who gives it a jump start, that has value, but it's bigger than that person. Trumpism will exist beyond Trump. Reform Party will exist beyond Nigel Farage and then here locking Marine Le Pen away, I don't think was going to take out that party. It's like next man up. Not to say that other leaders may fall down or they may lose momentum when these big personalities exit stage left, but he at least seems to be popular. And the French Parliament is very tenuous right now. Ever since Macron called that snap election last June, they've got this very uneasy alliance because they're really trying to keep this ascendant party out. And that shows up as there's this chronic instability. And the next time there's an election, we shall see, because they've only been gaining ground over the last several years.
Well, Emmanuel Macron seems to get a lot of positive press internationally, but at home, he's far from popular and his track record is pretty poor.
I think he's at 11 to 16% in the approval ratings, which is lower than Hollande. It's like the lowest in decades of anybody. And I would say that the base of the populist right around the world isn't his biggest fan. So certainly in the US, it's fun and he might be charismatic and people love France culturally and all that. But I wouldn't say that he's somebody who really engenders a lot of inspiration from that hard right, populist right base that is ascendant everywhere. And they probably on some level kind of, I don't want to say laugh at him, but sort of see him as from this bygone era, more establishment. And I think these types of people are going to be more and more ascendant.
Now to another country where the right has taken over and dramatically changed things for the better. El Salvador has seen a huge drop in violent crime. It has gone from having one of the highest homicide rates anywhere in the world to one of the lowest, and President Nayib Bukele took to X earlier today to share this video and reaffirm his commitment to tough on-crime measures. He tweeted, "They say you can't imprison your way out of crime, but in fact, a strong police force and a tough, well-managed prison system are the necessary first steps in transforming a hellscape into a safe, high-trust society." Let's have a look. Kosher, the stats don't lie here. The drop in violent crime in El Salvador is astonishing. And the fact that he did it so quickly is just as incredible.
He has put that country on the map in a way that is such a blueprint for everywhere, because you see San Francisco, you see Melbourne, you see all these once great, amazing cities telling the opposite story of just crime being on the up and up, not obviously to this level, but it can move quickly. And then you see this other example over here. And, there were examples before, like New York City under Giuliani and all that, where they cleaned up crime. But here it is the most extreme because it was known as the homicide capital of the world. There were 106 homicides per 100,000 people before he came in, and now it is less than 2.
Incredible.
Less than 2 in that time.
How does he do that? But you know how he did it. We've seen footage of it. It's by locking away the bad people.
And having a maximalist style prison where they have 23 hours of hard labor, no sunlight, all of that.
People don't want to go to prison.
People don't want to go. It's a true deterrent. And that is a 98% reduction. And it is such a blueprint. So it really makes other leaders look more and more foolish. You could take a place like that and turn it around so quickly. He's the most popular president, 98% approval rating in the world for this reason.
And the philosophy is so at odds with what we've embraced in Australia, because this so-called progressive way of looking at the criminal justice system, where it's all about the offenders' rights, how do we reintegrate them into society, all about that instead of prioritising the safety of the community, punishing people for wrongdoing, and also having punishments that act as a deterrent. That's, again, another message that seems to have been lost.
It's so simple in principle, but for some reason it's not being executed, or we know the reason.
Well, yes, we do. Now, there's been a development in Derek Chauvin's case. That's the man convicted of killing George Floyd, and that triggered the BLM riots of 2020. A conviction many see as political and fundamentally flawed, Kosher, and his defence attorney has now filed a new petition that challenges the murder conviction. And that petition includes over 50 former and current police officers who make sworn declarations that the technique Chauvin used to restrain George Floyd, the knee on the neck, was part of the training given to Minneapolis Police Department officers. Kosher, this is something that is a sleeper issue. I see it come up. There is a lot of interest in it because people have learnt a great deal more about that incident. They've learnt a great deal more about the toxicology report, for example, and they think this is a miscarriage of justice. I've got to say, when I first saw it, I thought this guy's guilty, he deserves to go away, throw away the key. But the information that's come out since then paints a very different picture.
I think you put it very well. It is a sleeper issue. It is very sad because the clock is ticking, and every day that it takes, he's in there. And if it was a miscarriage of justice or an over-criminalization, you don't get that time back if that is the case. It is also an issue that was so engulfed by the court of public opinion on top of the law. We like to say justice is blind and the system is perfect and you never miscalculate or over-prosecute. It does happen, hopefully not often, but it can happen. And this thing, you had everything from the riots, as you say, to the corporate logos, black all over LinkedIn, to everybody being asked about it. And George Floyd was elevated to almost sainthood status, even though he was a very flawed individual, which doesn't excuse what may or may not have happened here. But just nobody could have the guts to even say, even have this discussion back then would have probably gotten people canceled. And I do think that played a role in the way the jury pool probably reacted or the way the evidence was put forward. We'll never know to what extent, but it's impossible to insulate the jury and the whole system from that, and who knows how much of that played a role, but it certainly seems to have played some role, for sure.
Now, to an issue I don't fully understand still, Bitcoin. It's had its worst month in history, falling to around $80,000 US. Still seems like a lot, but it is its lowest value in over 7 months. 500 billion in value has been wiped off, and investors who've gone into debt to buy Bitcoin are dumping their coins to pay off loans. Kosha, what's driving this plunge? Do you understand Bitcoin? Because I still don't get it.
I think a lot of people, I mean, it is very complicated, and I certainly don't want to suggest that I know all the ins and outs of it, but what happened is it went from about 40,000 per Bitcoin to 100,000 in 1 year. So that's a rapid uprise.
Yeah.
And were the fundamentals driving that only, or were there other things around it, speculation, leverage? And it's the latter. I mean, the fundamentals are what they are. There's value if you believe in decentralized crypto exchanges and all that. But that kind of a bull run.
What's it based on? Like, it seems to be a currency based on, I don't know, mining electricity or something. It seems not to have a value base. That's what confuses me about it. And it is so volatile. I mean, it has had these dramatic increases and drops, but overall, it's trended up.
The crux of it is there's like a finite amount of this. There's like 21 million Bitcoin or something like that. It will never be increased. Is the belief system. So it's kind of like gold or what have you, that there's a finite supply, and so that's why there will always be inherent value to it. But there was so much around this where there was institutional buying, there was extreme leverage, and all of that at once. It's sort of a cascade effect of many things in the system that are changing and flipping at once, where institutions are dumping, interest rates they were expecting would drop by a certain time frame, they didn't. And then what's happening is those big institutions can cut their losses and dump. The profit takers did that and have made a lot of money over that bull run. The ones who have the ability to hold it for the long run are holding it. So these other people got wiped out, the ones who took on debt to buy it.
The ones who bought 100,000 are the ones who are feeling
it. And no one is buying it now, so then that will lead to a tank until there's a correction to whatever the market believes is a fair price, and then I think people might get back in.
Kosha Greta, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.